Hello and welcome to the special program of National Herald YouTube channel. My guest today is Mr. Aakar Patel, well-known journalist, columnist, and author of many reputed books. He is also an established social activist and currently heads India chapter of Amnesty International. Welcome, Aakar Bhai.
Thank you very much for having me, Zafar Bhai.
Well, I'm going to talk about the election results, the recent assembly election that were announced last week. They have been already done to death, but yet I want to know your take on these results because they look to be the resounding endorsement of Modi's leadership and Hindutva ideology. How do you look at it, these results, assembly results?
I would say that on both those counts, I would agree that Mr. Modi's leadership has been endorsed, and so has the ideology of Hindutva. It appears to me that those of us who are not backing it in full-throated fashion are at least sufficiently comfortable with it to not make it a negative factor in the way that they vote.
Right.
And if you look at just UP, the BJP has been securing more than 40% of the vote there consistently in the last four polls, starting in 2014, 2017, 2019, and now 2022.
An amazing phenomenon.
It is absolutely amazing in a first past the post system where this harkens back to the Congress of the 50s and 60s, where no other parties had this level of dominance on
this kind of dominance, right?
Yes. So and that's on the one side, that you've got a 40% vote share that you've held on to, much more than 40. And the other part is that it appears, based on the government's own data, that neither is the economy doing well, nor have the jobs that were promised materialized. Indeed, the government data says to us that jobs that existed in 2014 are now no longer there.
That's what surprises me. And that brings me to your recent book, Price of the Modi Years, that you have written. Economy is virtually in a shambles. I think India in recent past never has seen this kind of an economic crisis, joblessness, every indicator, government indicator of the economy going down and down, literally down the hill. Yet massive unemployment. So many thousands of people, or maybe lakhs of people, have died in a pandemic, COVID pandemic, because of government negligence. Yet people are voting in such big, huge numbers to move to the BJP. Why?
I think it'll need to be studied. I'm not aware of any deep and rich study, and these will come in time, because I think it's too early to be able to adduce based on what has happened over the last 3-4 years. We should remember that the collapse in GDP growth began in January 2018.
Right.
This is government data. And then for 13 quarters, which is for 2 years and 3 months, it sequentially fell. Then we had COVID. One of the reasons I think that the media or parts of the media have not looked at the failure in the economy more deeply is because of COVID. So the pandemic in the last 2 years has given the government an excuse, I think, to say, okay, things are bad because of the pandemic. Though, like I said, the collapse began for 2 years and 3 months before that.
Right.
Why it is that people may not necessarily push back against the government or vote against it, I cannot say. I can only speculate that this is either a very small aspect of why it is that they vote.
What is your speculation?
My speculation is that Hindutva is quite powerful and it is ingrained. And I think that people are willing to accept at least some form of a punishment inflicted on themselves to be able to have this kind of identity politics. And how far that goes, I don't know. I hope not very far.
Yeah, that's a very important point you have raised, and I was about to come that. And now we should be looking at this phenomenon. It's as you say, and it's quite clear that it's an endorsement of Hindutva. It has gripped the people's hearts and minds, and people, despite a severe economic crisis, are voting for it. something like what happened to jihad in Pakistan. How do you look at India ahead till at least to 2024 when the next Lok Sabha elections are due?
It appears to be the case that the economy will continue doing what it's doing, which is that if we grow at 9% this year, we will be back to the size of the economy that we were in February and March 2020. So we've lost 2 years. But in February and March 2020, we were already slowing dramatically. So, and the growth rate had reached 3% in that last quarter. The former chief economic advisor of the Prime Minister said that even this figure was likely inflated. So, high joblessness, very, very poor GDP growth rates, a very sharp difference between what a very small number of people, small number of corporates earn at the very top of the pyramid, and a very large numbers of people in a distressed population. I don't see that changing.
It's not changing. It may get worse, but not improve.
It may get worse. I think the thing is, Mr. Agha, I can solve a problem if I acknowledge that it exists. And once I acknowledge that there is a problem, then I can look at what the possible.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Do you mean that are you
the government does not acknowledge
Narendra Modi not acknowledging basically what's wrong?
When did you last hear of him saying, or like anybody in the government saying that joblessness is a problem, or that the lack of GDP growth is a problem? What they've done is they put us in a hole in 2020, 2021 with the lockdown. And after that, naturally, when there was a bounce back, they said, oh, we are the world's fastest growing economy again. So they tend to focus on things that are meaningless. They don't tend to focus on the substantial issues. And because they don't tend to do that, it is unlikely that they will find a solution.
You mean there is no acceptance at the government level of the crisis?
There is no acceptance of it.
Therefore, there will be no remedy action at all.
Nobody is strong enough or brave enough or wise enough, I would say, also to tell the emperor that there is a problem.
That's right.
Within his near circle, Mr. Modi operates with people who haven't been voted to power themselves. So, Ms. Sitaraman, Mr. Goyal, Mr. Jaitley before them, Mr. Jaishankar, none of them has ever won a Lok Sabha seat. These are the sorts of people that he must turn to A, carry out what it is that he wants, B, to give back advice and feedback to him. They are not going to do that. They don't hold their jobs because of the fact that they've been validated by the people. They hold their jobs because of the fact that they are completely beholden to Mr. Modi.
Right. But Aakar bhai, I mean, it's for a blind man to see what's going around. How come that Prime Minister is not aware about it or ignoring it himself?
I think that the validation that comes from the people continuously, as it has in the case of UP, removes all these problems. That he might be saying that I'm going to take you into a 25-year kind of Amrit Kal period.
That's right. You mean economically there may be problems all around, but politically he is winning and he's
indeed. And I think that gives him the confidence to say, okay, even if he accepts, which he does not, and he's never said it, that things are bad at the moment, what he's saying out loud is that we've got a 25-year period in which we'll do well. So he's giving himself a kind of a breathing space in terms of how to manage the economy better, saying that even if things are bad at this point, which he's not saying, by the way, we still have to look at where we will be 25 years from now.
So it's a very grim picture that you're painting. It means that economically we are going to be either as it is or maybe a little more worse, but politically they continue to winning. Therefore, do you think that their political agenda will be no more aggressive?
It depends. If there is such a thing as an average Hindu, we have to ask her and him how much pain they are willing to tolerate before they say, I don't want this, I want something else. At the moment, it seems like that the threshold of pain is very high. Will that continue? I don't know. Should it continue? I don't think so. We should be voting on the material aspects of our lives, the jobs.
But that's not happening.
That appears to be not actually happening at the moment.
Yeah.
It appears to be identity, it appears to me not just identity. I think when we use the word Hindutva, many of us might have various definitions of it. My own definition is the bullying and the brutalization of Muslims. That is it. There is nothing else to it. One day you cannot wear the hijab. The other day you cannot keep your mosque. The third day you cannot pray in the space that the government has given you. The fourth day you cannot sell eggs on the street. This is what it means. It doesn't offer anything positive. Hindutva doesn't say, for instance, we will broaden the scope of reservations and bring them into the private sector so that Dalits and Adivasis can get more representation. That's not what they say. What they say.
Do you mean that Hindutva is not even benefiting large section of Hindus themselves?
No, it is all its thrusts are primarily negative, and they have always been. Muslims should not keep that mosque in Ayodhya. Muslims should not keep the constitutional autonomy they have in Kashmir. Muslims should not keep their a personal law. Those were the 3 points on which the BJP made its name. And now in the same fashion, it continues. If you think of all the issues that have been in the news in the last 36 months, how many of them concern the benefit of Hindus? None.
None. You are right.
They are all about.
I would rather tend to say that the most it is the Hindus who have suffered the most with the economic crisis.
So Agha, I guarantee you, if this government or somebody in this government says that we want to turn Hindutva towards Hindus and broaden the scope of reservations for Dalits and Adivasis, the movement will break and split immediately. Because it goes after Muslims precisely for this reason. That is the only way to unify.
So you mean to say that the hatred politics will continue, or maybe because
that is all they have. That is there has been no shift in what the BJP has been saying since 1986, when Mr. Advani picked up the Babri issue, and there were people under him, Vinay Katyar, India. Those were the people who were part of the BJP and also part of BHP who took it up. Mr. Advani, after your viewers might not know this, the BJP had a single-digit vote share and did not have a single chief minister or a single majority of its own. They had some as partners in an alliance of its own. The BJP had never won a single state till 1990. The first states it won came in 1990 after the Babri movement.
And from there was no looking back.
There was no looking back. So they doubled their vote share with the Babri Masjid, then they doubled it once more. So they went from single digits to 18%, then they went to 38%. And this was only on the back of
Muslim hatred.
Yes, going after Muslims. So that will not change. We should not assume that will change. That is all they have.
That will not change, one, and two, will it be more virulent, more aggressive? Till at least up to the run up to the 2020.
What we have done, Mr. Agha, as a nation is that we have devolved authority to the mob. It is the mob that tells the young women in Bangalore and in Karnataka that they cannot wear the hijab, and the mob will stop the Muslims from praying at designated areas in Gurgaon. It is the mob that will make sure that the Muslims selling eggs on the streets of Ahmedabad cannot do so. So we've done a very dangerous thing. It doesn't even require the government to do this.
Mr. Aakar, you are pointing out a very serious phenomenon. Are you suggesting that we are moving from democracy to mobocracy?
We already have. I'm saying that the rule of...
We already have.
Absolutely. The fundamental aspect of modern government is that the state, the legitimate state, is the only authorized body that can use force. That violence is something that only the state can use. What we have done is devolve that violence down to the mob. The mob will determine when it gathers that in designated areas, Muslims cannot pray. The areas designated by whom? Designated by the government. The mob is saying to the government, we will overrule you. And the government backs off, saying, okay, we will stop the Muslims from praying here. That is what we have done. And this is, once you do that, the state in India, in our part of the world, is very small. We don't have a large state, which means that we don't have too many government employees, which means that we should not be devolving authority to the mob. But that is exactly what we've done.
That's a very dangerous state to live in.
But we have done this to ourselves deliberately. This is what it is. And this is not new. I'm saying that the state in India legitimized the vandalism of the mob in Ayodhya. The Supreme Court legitimized it. The vandals were given the site of the mosque back, and the victims were told to take 5 acres somewhere else.
It means also that it neutralizes or paralyzes the political parties which have some other agenda, which believe in development, which believe in secularism.
There are 3 things that we have done to ourselves especially post 2014. One is we have damaged ourselves as an economy. Secondly, we have damaged ourselves as a polity, that institutions have been brought to their knees and made to do the government's will. And thirdly, we've damaged the society.
Oh.
And all 3 of these are not reversible easily.
They are not reversible, you are saying?
No, they're not. I'm saying that we are entering a part of human history, Mr. Agha, where transitioning hundreds of millions of people who are poor and not particularly literate into the middle class is no longer possible.
Possible.
Those jobs are not there. Every year, what man produces requires less human labor in it, and this is a fact. The point at which one could transition hundreds of millions of people, the last point would have been in the 80s, perhaps. It is not there anymore.
No, so UPA government under Sonia Gandhi and Manmohan Singh's leadership did it during the 10 years when they lifted more than 10% of the people out of poverty line.
The number is 270 million, and it's true.
Amazing. It's an amazing job they had done.
Now, how
moved out of poverty to a lower middle class status?
How do you transition these people into middle class? Only with proper regular paying jobs. But
right.
Where are those jobs? They're not there. And I'm saying that it's only partly the fault of this government. Generally speaking, we are at a time in human history where such jobs will never be there. That you won't have. So the classic way is having people working in garments and so on. But we have lost jobs in garments. We have lost jobs in garments to Vietnam and Bangladesh. After Make in India was launched, the Prime Minister says that don't make fun of Make in India. You might, you're making. But the fact is that after Make in India was launched, manufacturing share of GDP has fallen from 16%.
Drastically.
Yes, so we are losing manufacturing jobs. In such a case, how will we be able to employ all of these hundreds of millions of people? We can't. And so that part of it is there. On the side of the polity, I think that any strong person, whether it's 70s or Mr. Modi here, strong, charismatic leaders will bend institutions to their will. That has happened here as well. Oh. But society's damage will be the hardest to undo.
That is what it seems happening, that despite such massive crisis, economic, political, all kinds of crises haunting India, people are still voting for the Hindutva and Narendra Modi.
We have become ecstatic about Hindutva and what it does to minorities, especially Muslims, and it will be very difficult to wean the people off from this kind of addiction. Every day, every week, we see something new. Every day.
You have used a very right word, that we are the substantial, rather majority is being addicted to Hindutva.
Well, those of us who are hopeful will say, okay, it's only 44% in UP that voted for the BJP and not 50. But that doesn't mean, Mr. Agha, that large numbers of the other 56% do not approve of what the BJP does in many things.
Oh, you even they may be quite.
I don't think that the 56%.
Quite a number of them may be silent supporters of this.
Absolutely, I don't think
they may not vote for BJP, but
they may not vote for the BJP, but I think large numbers of them will certainly agree with what it is that the BJP says and does.
Aakar Patel, you have painted a very grim picture and scenario of the country.
Fooling ourselves.
Oh,
we are in a part of our history which is likely the darkest period of it, and I don't think that I see light coming anytime soon. It will come. Eventually, it will come.
It has to, but there seems to be no light, at least for some time.
See, structurally, we still remain a secular, a pluralist nation. The fact that we are not seeing the evidence of it around us doesn't mean that in terms of the law, in terms of the spirit of what this country is, we have turned to what the BJP represents. I think that there is still some space for parties like the Congress, like the DMK, like the TMC, to be able to succeed in the future. However, I think that we will have to pass through this Agni Pariksha in full. And I don't know what it is that will come out at the end of it. But I think that while there is hope for the future and there will be something good at, 15 or 20 years down the line, the next decade I see as being very dark.
Oh, I'm really shocked at the kind of scenario you have painted, that the next decade for the entire country, for India, is very dark, and there seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel. With this note, I thank you for giving us time, and we will keep you bothering once in a while whenever we feel that you should explain political scenario to the countrymen. Thanks a lot,
Thank you so
Aakar.
much. Thank you.